Ladies and gentlemen, what do you do when he disappears? Do you spiral? Do you blame yourself? Do you start rewriting the last conversation, rereading old messages, convincing yourself it's all your fault? Or do you pause and realize his absence is not about you? It's revealing something about him. Because here's the truth, no one tells you. We think the test is how long we can wait, how long we can hold on, how well we can prove we're the one if we just say the right thing. But no, the real test is, can you hold your dignity when the silence gets loud? Can you choose yourself when he chooses distance? You see, in his absence, you get the answer you've been avoiding, not in his words, but in how you respond when those words go missing. This moment, when he pulls away, when you feel the gap, when your heart starts to ache, is the moment you either lose yourself or meet yourself. You either chase him or you come home to you. Because anyone can love you when you're showing up, but only someone who truly values you will love you enough not to disappear. The strength in silence is one of the most misunderstood and underestimated forms of power. We live in a world that celebrates loud exits, dramatic confrontations, and bold declarations. We're taught that if we're hurt, we must say something. If we're angry, we must shout. If we're walking away, we must explain ourselves. But sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is say nothing and leave anyway. Silence isn't the absence of feeling. It's often the presence of every emotion that's been held back for far too long. The kind of silence that comes after countless conversations where she had to repeat herself. After all the moments where she cried quietly into her pillow while pretending she was okay. After all the times she had to swallow her pride, minimize her pain, or justify someone's inconsistent behavior just to keep the peace. When a woman goes silent, it's not because she's given up easily. It's because she's been fighting a war inside herself, trying to reconcile her love for someone with the damage they're doing to her spirit. She's analyzed every moment, questioned every detail, doubted herself, over-explained, and given more chances than she can count. Her silence is not abrupt. It's the result of emotional exhaustion. She doesn't leave with a storm. She doesn't throw blame around or beg to be heard one last time. She simply chooses to remove herself from a situation that no longer values her voice. That moment, when she stops talking, stops chasing, stops trying to make someone see her, that is the moment of true power. Because that silence isn't passive, it's a boundary. It says, I've said everything I needed to say, and now I choose peace over repeating myself. For the person on the other side, that silence can be deafening. Because when she was still speaking, there was still hope. Her words, even when filled with pain or frustration, were a sign that she still cared enough to try. But the silence, that's when it's over. That's when she's decided that her energy is better spent on healing than on trying to fix what only she was holding together. People often underestimate the woman who stays quiet. They think her calm means she didn't feel anything deeply. But the truth is, it takes incredible strength to feel everything and still choose to walk away without making a scene. It takes emotional maturity to decide that proving a point isn't worth your peace. It takes dignity to bow out gracefully when you could easily explode from all the things you've had to keep inside. That kind of silence carries more weight than words ever could. It says, you don't get access to me anymore. Not because I hate you, but because I love myself enough to leave in peace. Her silence is a statement, a loud, clear message that no longer needs translation. It's what happens when self-worth rises higher than the need for validation. And in time, that silence begins to echo, in the spaces where her voice once filled the room, in the absence of her support, her warmth, her effort. The other person begins to feel the weight of everything they took for granted, because silence leaves room for reflection. It forces people to sit with themselves. And that's when they finally begin to realize what her words were trying to say all along. She didn't leave because she stopped caring. She left because she started caring about herself more. That's the part most people miss. They think when someone walks away, it's out of anger or coldness or bitterness. But often, it's the opposite. She left with love still in her heart. She left after exhausting every last effort, every ounce of patience, every second chance she could offer. She left with compassion, with tears still fresh in her eyes, but with a clarity she could no longer ignore. For so long, she stayed. Not because she didn't see the red flags, not because she was blind to the patterns, but because she believed in what they could be. She held on to the hope that if she just tried a little harder, if she gave a little more, if she loved a little deeper, maybe something would shift. Maybe he would change. Maybe the relationship would evolve into what she always dreamed it could become. But she slowly realized that her love alone could not fix what was broken. That effort doesn't matter when it's only coming from one side. That loyalty loses its meaning when it turns into self-abandonment. She found herself constantly showing up for someone who was only halfway present. She gave chances, overlooked things that hurt her, silenced her own needs to keep the peace. And in doing so, she started disappearing in her own life. She didn't walk away because she stopped caring about him. She walked away because she finally started caring about herself, her well-being, her mental peace, her emotional safety. She started asking different questions. Not, how do I make him stay? But, what is this costing me to keep holding on? Not, how do I fix this? But why am I the only one trying? There's a quiet kind of breaking that happens when a woman loves someone who doesn't show up for her. She starts questioning her worth. She starts wondering if she's asking for too much when really she's asking for the bare minimum. She starts doubting herself, thinking maybe love is supposed to hurt, supposed to feel uncertain, supposed to be one-sided. But eventually she wakes up, and not in a loud, dramatic way. Sometimes the loudest awakenings are the quietest. One morning she looks at herself in the mirror, tired of justifying the disrespect, tired of defending someone who never defends her, tired of sacrificing her happiness for someone who doesn't even notice her pain. And in that moment, something inside her shifts. She remembers who she is. She remembers that love should never require you to lose yourself. She remembers that peace is not a luxury, it's a right, and she finally gives herself permission to choose it. Even if it means walking away from someone she still loves. Even if it means grieving a future she hoped for. Because the moment she starts caring about herself, everything changes. She stops fighting battles that aren't hers to fight. She stops needing validation from someone who never truly saw her. She starts creating space in her life for something better. Even if she doesn't know what that looks like yet. And maybe he'll say she gave up too soon. Maybe he'll tell himself she didn't really care, but deep down, the truth will remain she cared too much for too long. She gave everything, and when she finally realized that loving him meant losing herself, she did the bravest thing she could do. She walked away, not because she didn't care, but because she finally did. True power isn't in making someone stay, it's in knowing when to walk away. We've been taught to measure love by how much we can hold on to it. How long we can wait, how hard we can fight. But love that only survives through begging, pleading, or constantly proving your worth isn't love, it's fear. Fear of losing someone who's already halfway out the door. Fear of being alone. Fear of letting go of the idea of what could be, even when reality shows something else entirely. There's a certain kind of power in saying yes. It takes strength to show up consistently, to care, to try. But there's a deeper power, a quieter, more grounded strength in knowing when it's time to stop, when it's time to stop shrinking yourself, when it's time to stop waiting for them to become who they promised they were, when it's time to stop ignoring the voice in your gut that's been whispering, this isn't it. Making someone stay is a false win. You might get them to stay physically, through guilt, through tears, through effort that's one-sided. But if their heart isn't in it, you haven't really gained anything. You're sharing space with someone who doesn't see your value the way you deserve to be seen. And over time, staying with someone who treats your love like it's optional chips away at your self-worth. You don't need someone who stays because you ask them to. You need someone who stays because they want to, because they see your light, because they feel safe in your presence. because they recognize that your love is not something to gamble with. And if they don't see that, if they need to be convinced or reminded or rescued over and over again, then staying becomes a slow form of self-abandonment. That's why walking away takes so much courage, because it means facing the truth that they may never become the person you hoped they would. It means choosing your peace over their potential. It means choosing solitude over uncertainty. And it means letting go of something that once felt like everything without knowing exactly what's waiting for you on the other side. But that's where the power is, in trusting yourself enough to know that you can survive the loss, that you can rebuild, that your worth doesn't decrease just because someone couldn't meet you where you are, that your love is not wasted simply because it wasn't received the way it should have been. When you walk away, you're not giving up. You're choosing to stop giving everything to someone who keeps giving you almost. You're choosing to break the pattern. You're choosing to protect your heart before it forgets what it feels like to be cared for properly. And that decision, though painful, is what marks the beginning of true healing. It doesn't feel powerful at first. It feels like grief, like doubt, like a question mark in the middle of your chest. But over time, that space where they used to live becomes yours again. You begin to hear your own voice. You begin to feel your own strength. And one day, you look back and realize that the moment you thought you were losing everything was actually the moment you were taking everything back. Walking away isn't weakness, it's the deepest form of self-respect. It's easy to stay in situations that feel familiar, even when they hurt. It's easy to hold on to people because you've already invested time, energy, love, and hope into them. And when you care deeply, the idea of leaving feels like failure. You keep thinking, maybe if I try harder, maybe if I love more, maybe if I'm more patient, more understanding, more forgiving. And so you stay. You stay because leaving feels like giving up. But it's not. There comes a point where you realize that staying is no longer strength. It's sacrifice. Not the kind that builds love, but the kind that slowly erases you. When you keep accepting less than you deserve, when you keep waiting for someone to meet you halfway, and they never do, it begins to wear down your sense of self. You start doubting your needs, your standards, your worth. And it doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, quiet, almost invisible, until one day you don't recognize yourself anymore. That's when the real strength is needed, not to keep holding on, but to finally let go. To walk away, not because you no longer care, but because you've realized you've been the only one caring enough for both people. And that's not love, that's emotional survival. It's holding everything together while the other person barely shows up. It's explaining, justifying, over-giving, and hoping. And somewhere in the middle of all that, you start to disappear. So when you choose to walk away, you're not being weak. You're choosing to stop betraying yourself. You're choosing to stop settling. You're choosing to say, I deserve to be chosen, not just when it's easy, not just when it's convenient, but every day. That's not weakness. That's a woman reclaiming her value. That's a human being drawing the line and saying, no more. People will sometimes look at you and say, you gave up too fast, but they didn't see the nights you cried yourself to sleep while pretending you were fine. They didn't hear the conversations you had with yourself, trying to convince your heart to stay when your soul was already tired. They didn't feel the ache of being emotionally alone while lying next to someone who barely noticed your pain. They don't know what it took to love someone who made you feel like too much and not enough at the same time. Walking away doesn't mean you stopped loving them. It means you finally started loving yourself. It means you decided that your peace matters more than their potential. It means you stopped believing that love is proven by how much suffering you're willing to endure. Love doesn't demand your silence. It doesn't ask you to keep accepting pain as part of the package. And it certainly doesn't thrive in imbalance, confusion, or one-sided effort. So when you walk away, you're choosing clarity, you're choosing your future, you're choosing the version of yourself who remembers what it feels like to breathe freely, to laugh without restraint, to love without constantly questioning if it's safe. That choice doesn't come from weakness. It comes from finally knowing what your heart is worth and refusing to keep handing it to someone who never learned how to hold it. He never expected her to leave because she always showed up. That was the pattern. No matter how distant he became, how inconsistent his love was, or how many times he pulled away, she stayed. She kept trying. She forgave what others would have walked away from. She gave chances that weren't even earned. She kept believing that if she showed up enough, he'd eventually meet her there. And over time, he got used to that rhythm. He got used to her texts, her check-ins, her care. He got used to her energy wrapping around him like a safety net. She became predictable, not because she was ordinary, but because she was reliable in a way he hadn't earned. He knew that no matter how careless or unavailable he became, she'd be there, loving, hoping, fixing, giving. So he stopped trying, not out of malice, but out of comfort. He mistook her presence for permanence. He believed that her love would keep her stuck, that she'd never really leave, because she never had before. And maybe that was his biggest mistake, thinking she'd always tolerate being the only one invested. What he didn't realize was that she wasn't staying because she was weak. She was staying because she believed in the bond. She believed in what they could be. She thought, maybe if I just love harder, stay longer, be more patient, he'll finally wake up and realize what we have. But love doesn't work like that. You can't keep showing up for someone who's not showing up for you. Eventually, even the strongest heart runs out of reasons to stay. One day, something shifted in her. It wasn't a dramatic blow up. It was quiet, almost invisible from the outside. But inside, she felt it. The moment her energy turned inward. The moment she stopped explaining herself, stopped chasing after clarity, stopped hoping he'd finally step up. She had poured so much into someone who couldn't see past his own ego, someone who never imagined she'd have the strength to walk away. But she did. And when she finally left, he didn't understand it. He couldn't believe it. Not her. Not the one who always forgave. Not the one who always stayed. That's what made it hit so hard. Because when the woman who always shows up finally stops showing up, it's not a phase. It's a decision, a deep soul-level choice that says, I'm done choosing someone who never really chose me. He thought her silence was temporary, that she'd reach out eventually, like she always did. But days turned to weeks, and weeks into months, and he started to feel it. The weight of her absence, the space she once filled, the small things that once felt automatic, her support, her softness, her presence, were gone. And that's when he realized that what he had taken for granted was irreplaceable. She didn't leave to teach him a lesson. She left because she finally learned hers. That no matter how deeply you care about someone, you cannot make them rise to meet you. That love is not supposed to be a war where only one person is fighting. That showing up for yourself sometimes means walking away from someone you once begged to stay. He never thought she'd leave, because he never truly saw how much she gave until she stopped giving. He never understood how deeply she loved until she stopped reaching out. He never expected the silence until it became the loudest thing in the room. Closure doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it comes in distance. Not everyone you love will have the courage to end things with honesty. Not everyone who hurt you will offer an apology. And sometimes the hardest truth to accept is that the conversation you're waiting for, the one where they finally explain, acknowledge, or say they're sorry, may never come. There are people who will leave quietly, who will ghost, who will shut down instead of showing up for that last talk you thought you deserved. And in that silence, you're left holding the weight of the story alone. You sit with the confusion, the flashbacks, the memories that still feel too vivid, trying to piece together what went wrong. You wonder if it was your fault, if you said too much or not enough, if you were too much or somehow never enough. You go over every detail looking for signs, thinking maybe if you just understood what happened, the pain would lessen. But sometimes there's nothing more to understand. Sometimes the closure is not about getting their version. It's about giving yourself the truth. And that's where distance becomes your clarity. Distance strips away the emotional noise. It takes you out of the cycle of hoping and hurting. It gives you room to breathe, room to remember who you are without the chaos of waiting on someone who won't meet you in your pain. Distance becomes the silence where your healing begins, because when you're no longer reaching for answers from someone who's unwilling to give them, you start answering the only question that matters: what do I need now to heal? Closure from another person is a gift, not a guarantee. It's something we hope for, but not something we can depend on. There are people who will never apologize, who will act like nothing happened, who will move on while you're still bleeding, and it will feel unfair. Because it is. But fairness isn't what heals you. The ability to reclaim your own peace is. Distance teaches you to stop needing them to acknowledge the pain they caused, to stop needing their words to validate your experience, to stop believing that healing is only possible if they give you permission to let go. Because they might never. They might never say what you deserve to hear. And still, you can heal. There is strength in the moment you stop chasing the ending you hoped for. There is strength in saying, even without their apology, I choose to forgive. Even without the conversation, I choose to accept. Not because what they did was okay, but because you are no longer willing to carry the weight of their silence. That's the power of distance. It puts space between you and the pain, between you and the version of yourself that thought love meant waiting for someone to finally see your worth. Distance doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you finally care enough about yourself to stop living in confusion. It means you've chosen peace over potential. And that is where real closure lies, not in their words, but in your decision to no longer need them. She chose peace over potential because potential that doesn't become reality becomes poison. For the longest time, she held on to the idea of what they could be. The late night conversations, the moments when he was soft and open, the rare glimpses of connection that gave her just enough hope to stay. He wasn't consistent, but he had potential. He wasn't always kind, but sometimes he saw her. He wasn't ready, but he said he was trying. And so, she gave it time. She waited, hoping the man she believed he could become would one day fully show up. But hope without evidence becomes heavy. Waiting turns into wondering. And slowly, the vision she once clung to started to betray her. She was loving a version of him that only existed in her imagination. She fell in love with fragments, with promises, with what felt possible. And that's what kept her stuck. Not his actions, but the space between who he was and who he could be. There is a painful truth. Many don't want to face potential can be dangerous when it delays your healing. It can convince you to ignore the red flags. It can make you second-guess your standards. You start to excuse inconsistency as growth. You start to interpret mixed signals as emotional struggle. And all the while, you slowly disappear in the process of waiting for someone else to become the person you need. She realized that loving someone for their potential means constantly living in the future. It means being stuck in a cycle of maybe someday, while your needs go unmet in the present. It means staying in relationships that are fueled by hope and starved of actual effort. And one day it hits, you're building a life around a fantasy, not a reality. So she chose peace. Not because she stopped believing in his potential, but because she finally believed in her own. She realized that peace is found in what is, not what could be. She stopped trying to turn someone into a partner they didn't want to become. She stopped giving herself reasons to stay based on moments instead of patterns. Peace isn't always exciting. It's not always filled with butterflies and drama, but it's solid, it's kind, it's reliable. And for someone who has lived in emotional chaos, peace feels unfamiliar at first. It can even feel boring. But that's just because you've been conditioned to associate love with struggle. The truth is, she was tired of struggling, tired of overthinking, tired of analyzing words and actions that never lined up. She realized that potential had become her prison, a beautiful lie that kept her from seeing the truth. And that truth was simple: if someone really wants to grow, they will. If someone values you, they won't risk losing you over their own fear or laziness or indecision. She chose peace, not because it was easy, but because it was finally necessary. She stopped confusing suffering with loyalty. She stopped seeing herself as someone who could fix another person's wounds. She learned that love is not about constantly sacrificing your own emotional safety in the hope that someone else will eventually come around. And so, she walked away, not because she didn't love him, but because she loved herself enough to stop settling for the idea of love. She chose the present over promises, peace over potential, and in doing so, she didn't just free herself from a relationship. She freed herself from the illusion that she ever had to wait to be chosen. So let this be a reminder. Her power wasn't in loud exits or final words. Her power was in the quiet, unwavering decision to choose herself, to stop settling for halfway love, to walk away from what no longer nourished her, without anger, without apology, and without looking back. Because the most powerful thing a woman can do is not to make someone stay, but to have the courage to leave when she finally realizes she deserves more. And in that silence, in that strength, in that walk away, she didn't lose anything. She reclaimed everything.